The night was colder than usual, the wind carrying grit across the empty streets as she made her way to the hangar once more. Her cloak clung to her shoulders, heavy not with fabric but with the secret she had carried too long. Kalen was inside, bent over the wreckage of his half-finished engine, his hands moving with the urgency of a man running out of time. Sparks crackled in the gloom, casting his face in stark relief, determined, bruised, and unbroken. She lingered in the doorway, caught by the sight of him fighting for a dream the Empire had sworn he would never touch. For the first time she knew she could no longer remain only a shadow in his life. Kalen glanced up, eyes weary but still alight. "You came. But I was about to try something reckless." He gestured toward the coil, jury-rigged with wires scavenged from 3 different machines. "If it holds for even a few seconds, it proves the design isn't impossible. If it fails, well, at least I'll know how it fails." He grinned faintly, but the tension in his jaw betrayed his fear. She crossed the floor to stand beside him, her heart pounding. "And if it succeeds, then it changes everything." His voice was quiet, almost reverent. He leaned closer to the device, checked the final connections, and triggered the power feed. The coil shuddered. A low hum spread across the hangar, vibrating the walls. For a breathless instant, energy stabilized in the lattice, glowing blue as it had never done before. Kalen's eyes widened with awe. "It's working." Then the glow sputtered, collapsing in a cascade of sparks. He yanked the wires free before the whole assembly could detonate. The silence afterward was broken only by the hiss of smoke. He sank to the floor, coughing, but when he lifted his face there was no despair, only fierce triumph. "Did you see that?" Even for a moment it held. "It means I was right." His gaze locked with hers, blazing with conviction. "If one man can do this in the dark, imagine what all of us could do in the light." Her throat tightened. Those words struck deeper than he could ever know. She could not remain silent, not after watching him defy impossibility with nothing but will and scraps. The weight of her disguise felt unbearable. She stepped back, her breath sharp, and whispered, "Kalen, there's something you must know." He frowned. "What is it?" She drew back her hood. For the first time he saw her face fully lit by the flicker of dying sparks, the pale skin, the sharp lines, the unmistakable bearing of command. Recognition dawned, followed quickly by disbelief and anger. He staggered to his feet, eyes wide. No, this is some trick." "You." His voice hardened. "You're her. The Empress." She forced herself to meet his fury. "Yes, and I am the one who has stood here with you every night." He took a step back, shaking his head as though trying to banish the vision. "All this time while we were hunted, while they broke us, you watched. You let it happen. Do you have any idea what your laws have done to us?" His words were knives, each one cutting through the armor she had worn all her life. She did not flinch. "I did not know the truth. I was told the colonies thrived. I believed lies spun by men who wished to keep me blind. But Kalen, I have seen it now. Cannot unsee it. And I will not allow it to continue." Before he could answer, the hangar doors crashed open. Soldiers in imperial colors flooded in, weapons raised. Their commander strode forward, bowing sharply. "Your Majesty, we were told you had vanished from the palace. You must return at once. This man is under arrest for crimes against the crown." Kalen's shoulders stiffened. His eyes flicked to the guards, then to her. He straightened, refusing to cower, though his voice was quiet. "So this is it. I build in the dark, and they drag me away for daring to think." The soldiers advanced, but she stepped forward, raising her hand. "No, you will not touch him." The commander hesitated. "Your Majesty, he is guilty of treason." Her voice rang out, stronger than she had ever heard it, carrying the weight of a decision that would reshape her empire. "Then I too am guilty. For I studied with him, I learned from him, and I believe in what he has built. You will not lay a hand on him." By my decree, from this moment forward, no man shall be denied the right to knowledge. She turned to Kaelin, her gaze unwavering. And you will be the first to walk through the gates of the new academy. You will build in the light, not in shadows. The soldiers froze, stunned into silence. The commander opened his mouth, but the authority in her tone left no room for dissent. Slowly they lowered their weapons. Kaelin stared at her, torn between rage and disbelief. You expect me to trust you now? After everything? I expect nothing, she said softly. But I offer you the chance to shape what comes next. Not for me, but for every man who has ever studied with nothing but a dying light to guide him. The silence stretched, heavy with the weight of choice. At last Kaelin exhaled, a ragged sound. He looked at his ruined engine, at the scraps of paper that had nearly cost him his life, then back at her. I don't care about your throne. I don't care about your decrees. But if you're telling the truth, if you'll truly open those gates, then I'll walk through them. Not for you, but for the future. A tremor passed through her, relief mingling with fear. She nodded once, solemn. Then it begins tonight. The soldiers stood at rigid attention, awaiting further orders, but she ignored them. Her eyes remained on Kaelin, on the man who had torn open the veil of her ignorance and shown her the strength hidden in the dust. In his defiance she had found the courage to break her silence. When she finally left the hangar, escorted by a wall of guards, she felt the world shift beneath her feet. The empire she had inherited was gone. In its place lay something uncertain, fragile and dangerous, but alive with possibility. Behind her, Kaelin stood amid the ruins of his engine, watching her go. Neither of them knew what storms would follow, but both understood one truth. The night of secrecy was over. The light had been kindled, and nothing, not chains, not laws, not even the weight of a crown, could extinguish it now. The following nights blurred into one another, yet each left a sharper impression on her mind than the day before. The Empress, still cloaked as a nameless traveler, came to the hangar almost without thought, as though her steps had found their own rhythm leading her there. Kaelin always greeted her with a nod or a half-smile, never asking for explanations, never prying beyond what she gave. He seemed to accept her presence the way he accepted the battered walls and the dust storms outside. A fact of existence, one more constant in a world that tried so hard to grind men down. He showed her more of his work. The engine prototype sprawled across the hangar floor in a patchwork of scavenged components. Some pieces were jury-rigged from old cooking stoves, others from medical equipment stripped of their original purpose. She marveled at how his mind bent every object toward the singular vision of propulsion. He had no proper casing, so he built one from melted scrap. He lacked a power regulator, so he rewired an outdated reactor into a makeshift stabilizer. Each imperfection would have made court engineers sneer, yet Kaelin's contraption pulsed with possibility. But she also saw the toll it exacted. His hands shook more often. His eyes carried deep shadows, and his voice sometimes broke when exhaustion pressed too hard. Still he pressed forward. When she asked if he ever considered stopping, he gave her a look of disbelief. Stop. And do what? Crawl back to the factories until they bury me. Well, I'd rather burn with my work than rot without it. The conviction in his words struck her harder than any speech she had ever endured from her ministers. It was during one of those long nights, when the coil sputtered dangerously and he slammed his palm against the console in frustration, that his mask cracked. He sank onto a crate, staring at the machine with hollow eyes. Do you know what it feels like, he murmured, to dream of something so fiercely that it tears you apart? And to know, deep down, that no one in power will ever let you reach it. That they'll look at your birth, your blood, your dirt-stained hands, and decide you're unworthy before you even begin. She wanted to answer yes, to tell him of her own prison of expectation and isolation, but her disguise sealed her lips. She could only say, I know what it is to be told who you must be, rather than asked who you are. His gaze lingered on her, searching for truth, but whatever he saw seemed to satisfy him. He gave a short laugh, bitter but not without warmth. Then you understand more than most. They returned to the engine. She guided him through a correction to his feedback loop, and his eyes lit again with that spark she had come to crave. Yet even as their hands moved in tandem across wires and schematics, a tension hung between them, as if both sensed that this fragile partnership balanced on the edge of something larger. That balance shattered days later. A patrol of alien enforcers descended on the district, more brutal than before. The colonists whispered of new quotas, harsher laws, the tightening of a noose. She and Kalen were deep in the hangar when the warning shouts echoed down the street. His expression hardened. They're sweeping again. He stuffed his notebooks into their hiding place. His movements practiced, desperate. The door banged open with such force it rattled the rusted hinges. 6 enforcers stormed inside, their armor gleaming with polished cruelty. One barked in a guttural tongue, demanding to know what they were doing. Kalen stepped forward, planting himself between them and his work. His voice was steady. Repairing scrap. Nothing more. They did not believe him. Their leader stalked to the half-built engine and kicked it, sending sparks skittering across the floor. Another yanked the chalk-scrawled equations from the wall and tore them down with a sneer. Kalen's fists clenched, but he forced himself still. The Empress, hidden in the shadows, felt fury boil within her. To see knowledge destroyed so casually, to watch him stripped of his labor, tore at her soul in a way no battlefield loss ever had. One enforcer seized a notebook from the floor. This time Kalen moved without hesitation. He lunged, wrenching it back with raw strength. The alien struck him across the face, blood blossoming from his lip. Still, Kalen staggered upright, clutching the book against his chest. His voice shook but did not break. You can tear the pages, you can burn the machines, but you'll never erase what I carry here. He tapped his temple with one trembling finger. You cannot kill thought. The words froze her. In that instant she saw him not merely as a mechanic or a dreamer but as something far greater, a flame that could outshine empires if only given breath. The enforcers seemed to sense it too, for their sneers sharpened into menace. One raised his weapon, threatening to drag him away. She nearly revealed herself then, nearly cast aside the disguise and commanded them to stop in the full weight of her imperial authority. But the thought of what would follow, her identity exposed, his work condemned as treason, paralyzed her. At last the patrol withdrew, leaving the hangar wrecked and Kalen bruised but unbroken. He slumped to the ground, laughing bitterly through bloodied teeth. They think pain will silence us. They'll never understand. Every strike just reminds me why I fight. He opened the notebook, staring at its smudged pages as if they were scripture. She knelt beside him, reaching to steady his shaking hands. The sight of his resilience, his refusal to bow, ignited something inside her chest that had long lain dormant. She realized then that her empire was not what she believed. It was built not on prosperity but on chains, on silencing men like Kalen who might one day rise beyond their masters. For the first time in her reign, she felt the throne slip beneath her feet. If one mechanic in the dark could defy the impossible, how many others lay buried under her silence? The question gnawed at her, relentless. She could not turn away now, not after seeing him stand bloodied and unbroken before the machinery of oppression. That night she left the hangar shaken, her cloak heavy with the stench of smoke and rust. She told herself she would return tomorrow, but she knew the truth. Tomorrow would not be enough. The world she had seen in fragments was demanding more, and Kalen's defiance was the hammer striking at the very foundation of her crown. The choice was no longer whether she would continue this charade, but how long she could keep it before the weight of truth crushed her disguise entirely. The next evening she returned, though she told herself it was only curiosity, a scholar's interest in seeing how far an untrained mind could go. The mechanic was already at work, bent over a gutted generator pulled from some scrap heap. The faint whine of its unstable core filled the hangar, mingling with the scrawl of chalk against steel plating where he had begun mapping a design. He barely glanced up when she stepped inside. "Thought you wouldn't come back," he muttered, flashlight dangling from his fingers instead of clenched in his mouth this time. "Most people take one look at me and decide I'm either crazy or wasting my life." "I'm here," she answered simply, and that seemed enough. His name, she soon learned, was Kalen. He said it with no flourish, as if it carried no weight, yet she found herself repeating it silently. Kalen had lived his whole life in the colony slums, repairing machines to earn just enough to keep breathing. But while other men drank themselves dull after their shifts, he saved fragments of wire, shards of glass, and scraps of data chips, anything that could feed his pursuit. Every night he returned to this hangar to wrestle with concepts that the Empire had declared forbidden to him. When she asked why, his eyes hardened. "Because if I don't, nothing will ever change. They want us bent over broken machines until we die. I'd rather die trying to build something new." He said it not as bravado but as a plain fact, as though every breath of his life was already wagered on that dream. She watched him test his makeshift coil. Sparks leapt, hissing across the floor. He jerked the wires free just before the whole device could burst apart. Instead of despair, he laughed, a harsh but vibrant sound. "Close. Closer than last night. Imagine what I could do with real tools, real materials. I'd rewrite propulsion physics." His grin faded into something like bitterness. "But they'll never let a man like me through the academy gates. Born in the wrong district, wearing the wrong blood. That's all that matters." Her silence stretched, heavy with unspoken truths. If she revealed herself, he would know that the very system he cursed belonged to her. But she could not yet speak it. She could only listen, absorbing each word like a knife in her conscience. Night after night she returned. Sometimes she offered corrections cloaked as suggestions, other times she simply stood in the shadows and listened as he reasoned aloud. He worked with a ferocity she had never seen in her court scholars, who prized comfort and status over discovery. Here was a man with nothing to lose, and in that nothingness he found the freedom to imagine beyond the boundaries set for him. One evening, heavy boots echoed down the alley outside the hangar. Kalen's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "Enforcers," he whispered, and began shoving his notes beneath a loose panel in the floor. She felt a chill at the name. The alien overseers patrolled these colonies mercilessly, their purpose not to protect but to suppress. If they found Kalen studying forbidden sciences, they would drag him away and burn everything he had worked for. The door clanged open, and 3 tall figures stepped in, their armor gleaming in the weak light. Their voices were guttural, their words laced with contempt. "Inspection. This building is unauthorized for habitation." Kalen straightened, grease-stained hands held loosely at his sides. His jaw was set, his body tense, but he did not cower. The Empress stood behind a column, heart pounding. For all her training in diplomacy and statecraft, she had never felt so powerless. She wanted to shout her identity, to command them to leave, but to do so would undo her disguise and expose him as well. The enforcers prowled the hangar, smashing open crates and scattering his meager supplies. One lifted a notebook, flipping through pages of diagrams. Kalen lunged forward. "That's mine." The alien sneered and tore a handful of pages free before tossing the rest to the floor. Kalen's face went pale, but he snatched the shredded fragments and clutched them to his chest as if they were life itself. The Empress bit the inside of her cheek, forcing herself to stay hidden. She hated herself for her silence, yet she could not act. Not yet. Finally, after finding nothing worth confiscating, the enforcer spat a warning and departed, leaving the hangar in chaos. Kalen's shoulders sagged. He sank to the ground, breathing hard, eyes shining with anger. "They think they can crush us, wipe away every spark we have. But ideas don't burn so easily." He smoothed the torn paper against his knee, refusing to let it go. "Even if they took it all, I'd still carry it here." He tapped his temple. "They'll never kill that." She stepped from her hiding place at last. The words came quietly, without her usual control. You're braver than most men I've ever met." He looked at her, sweat streaking the grime on his face, and gave a small, humorless smile. "Bravery? Well, just stubbornness. But maybe that's enough." She wanted to tell him that it was more than enough, that his defiance in the dark meant more than the pomp of any throne room. Instead she knelt beside him, gathering stray papers. Their hands brushed, and the fleeting contact sparked something unexpected, something she had never allowed herself to feel. Together they pieced the fragments back into order. The work was ruined for the night, but Kaelin's fire remained. His persistence was not born of privilege or ambition for power. It was born of necessity, of the unyielding will to prove that his life was not as small as the Empire decreed. Watching him, the Empress realized she no longer came merely as a disguised scholar. She came because here, in the echoing dark, she had found a man whose spirit forced her to question everything she thought she knew. When at last he rose and tucked the salvaged pages away, he said softly, "Tomorrow I'll try again. The engine will hold eventually. It has to." She nodded, feeling the weight of her hidden crown pressing invisibly against her skull. She wanted to promise him the world, but all she could say was, "I'll be here." And as she stepped out into the cold night, she knew it was true. The Empress had ruled for years from behind gilded walls, her face hidden from her subjects except in carefully crafted holograms. Whispers in court insisted she was untouchable, aloof, almost divine. Yet beneath the jeweled diadem and endless parade of courtiers, she felt only the stifling weight of ignorance. She had been told since childhood that her empire prospered, that every colony was thriving under her banner. But her instincts warned her the truth was less luminous. One night, disguised in plain clothes and cloaked as a traveling scholar, she abandoned the safety of her palace. If she could not trust her ministers, then she would see the truth with her own eyes. The outer colonies were nothing like the marbled halls of the capital. Steel skeletons of half-collapsed buildings loomed over alleys caked in dust. Neon signs flickered faintly, their colors drained by power rationing. The air smelled of oil, rust, and the acrid smoke of burned-out machinery. Star freighters roared above, their engines screaming as they ferried resources to richer worlds. On the ground, men slumped in gutters after 14-hour shifts. The Empress, wrapped in the guise of a thin, sharp-eyed traveler, moved unnoticed among them. No one here would imagine that beneath her simple cloak beat the heart of the one who commanded entire fleets. It was in these shadows that her journey changed. She had been walking for hours, her boots coated with grime, when she noticed a faint, steady glow emanating from a derelict hangar. At first she assumed it was a worker salvaging scraps. Yet something about the persistence of the light drew her closer. The sound of muttered calculations carried across the empty lot. She pressed herself against the rusted frame of the hangar door and peered inside. A man sat alone under the belly of a broken shuttle, a battered flashlight clenched between his teeth. His hands were stained with grease, his knuckles raw. His clothes patched so many times they barely resembled fabric. Around him lay a scatter of ragged notebooks, each crammed with equations and diagrams. The Empress watched as he scribbled furiously, paused, erased, then tried again. He was not repairing machinery, he was studying. His lips moved as he recited formulas about propulsion fields, energy transfer ratios, and the delicate balance of plasma containment. For a long moment she could not comprehend what she was seeing. The Empire's law was clear. Humans born in the lower colonies were forbidden from pursuing advanced sciences without permits they would never receive. Knowledge of hyperspace mechanics was reserved for the elite academies. And yet this man defied that decree, hunched beneath a ruined shuttle, teaching himself by the dim beam of a failing flashlight. Her pulse quickened. She felt the old certainty of her upbringing tremble. Could this nameless mechanic, working with scraps, truly grasp what her most privileged scholar spent years mastering? She leaned forward unconsciously, her curiosity overcoming the caution drilled into her by decades of rule. The man cursed softly, snapped a graphite stick in half, then dragged his hand through his hair. He looked at his incomplete schematic as if sheer will could force the lines to coalesce into a functioning engine. His frustration made him human, but it was the persistence in his eyes that made him extraordinary. He muttered, "If the hypercoil stabilizer keeps burning out in the equation, I must be missing the feedback ratio." The words escaped her before she could stop them. "Show me." The mechanic flinched, jerking his head up, flashlight beam slashing across the dark. His eyes narrowed at the stranger standing at the threshold. His first instinct was suspicion, not fear, which impressed her more than she expected. "Who's asking?" he demanded, voice rough from long nights and little sleep. She stepped closer, cloaking her natural authority in the posture of a scholar. "Someone who's seen stabilizers fail for the same reason." "May I?" He hesitated, then wordlessly handed her the scrap of paper. The sketch was crude but startlingly precise. He had mapped the containment lattice of a hyperdrive with only a handful of scavenged data points, yet his feedback loop faltered where energy bleed would overwhelm the system. She crouched beside him, the smell of oil and rust filling her senses. With a piece of chalk he had been using, she adjusted a single variable and drew a new stabilizing line. His eyes widened. "You know this stuff. Enough to see where the flaw lies," she replied carefully, suppressing the regal cadence that might betray her. He leaned forward, studying the new equation with something close to reverence. That might actually work. I've been staring at it for weeks." His voice dropped, and for a moment his pride softened into wonder. "No one else around here cares. They fix what they're told to fix and drink away the rest. But me, I want to build something better. Not just patch broken engines. I want to make one that lasts." The Empress said nothing. She was too consumed by the revelation. Here was a man denied access to power grids, libraries, or even proper light, yet he sought to rewrite the laws of propulsion through sheer will. His ambition was not for wealth or recognition but for creation itself. They worked side by side for nearly an hour. He explained his theories with surprising eloquence, his hands flying as he sketched and corrected himself. She offered subtle suggestions, each one nudging his ideas further. He did not defer to her. He challenged her thoughts, argued when he disagreed, then grinned when they found common ground. The Empress, long accustomed to hollow praise and fearful silence, found herself exhilarated by the clash of minds. At last, when the flashlight flickered and died, he sighed and leaned back against the hull. "Guess that's it for tonight." He glanced at her with cautious curiosity. "You never said who you were." She met his gaze, heart pounding with the dangerous truth she could not speak. "Just someone passing through." "Then why stop here?" Her throat tightened. The answer formed silently in her mind. "Because you are the first man who has made me believe in something greater than a throne." But aloud she only said, "Because your light was still burning when everything else was dark." He laughed softly, though his eyes searched her face as if to measure her sincerity. "Well, stranger, if you've got more tricks like that correction, maybe come back tomorrow. Could use another set of eyes." She nodded, pulling her cloak tighter as she rose. "Perhaps I will." Outside, the wind cut cold against her cheeks, yet her chest felt warm. For years she had lived insulated from the reality of her empire, cocooned in luxury and lies. But one mechanic with a dying flashlight had pierced that illusion. She walked into the night, the weight of her crown hidden but heavier than ever, and knew she would return. The empire she had built no longer seemed invincible. It seemed brittle, and within its cracks she had glimpsed something indomitable, the relentless fire of a human spirit refusing to be extinguished. That fire unsettled her. That fire might change everything.